Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and for those on Instagram, Uncle Joe. Before I go any further, can you hear me clearly, sir?
I can hear you very clearly.
Fantastic. That's all I want to know. Ladies and gentlemen, I must first apologize. We got a brief technical issue. And of course, these are things that happen when you're not in control of certain things. But as we aim towards being in control of certain things, we just have to go with a particular flow. Even though many people say, Silburn, you always say don't go with the flow. But today, anyhow, I've got to go with this flow. Today, I want to actually introduce Dr. Bishop Joe Aldred. And this discussion tonight is around the new working group launched to address challenges faced by the Windrush generation. We all know about the Windrush generation. We all know about the scandal. We all know about the what should I say, the chaos which transpired a few years ago. Although these persons came many years ago. Uncle Joe will tell you that he's also a part of the Windrush generation by virtue of his parents. Uncle Joe as well, which you might wonder, where did I get Uncle Joe from? Well, that's why I call him Uncle Joe. And he will tell you, of course, his history in regards to that. But he has been recently being placed as a member of this new cross-party commission. Many people are asking the question, is this a new one? What about the Wendy Williams commission, which was done? And on the 22nd, we also had the Windrush Day, even though COVID was in operation still at the same time, but many people came out to it. Now, without further ado, I want to introduce Sir Joe Aldred. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you. Been enjoying the Caribbean weather.
Yes, yes.
Thankfully, we have a garden and quite a lot of greenery around here. So this form of lockdown is not the worst in the world. I have to say that today, as the sun was beaming down and the place was really hot, it was one day in the year I didn't miss Jamaica.
Wow. And today, today's my son's birthday. He's now a teenager.
Happy birthday. Yes,
I got a teenager in the house. Now, for those who are from Jamaica and years ago, I don't know if you know about this thing called bacon spray.
No, I don't actually. But...
Bacon spray is what they used to kill teenagers. Teenagers were called these little roaches. So that is a bit funny one. So so that's very good, and it's a very hot day. Well, sir,
my teenager never quite became that in our house.
So you're responsible for Pentecostal and multicultural relationship of church and together in England. It's a bishop of Church of God of Prophecy, honorary research fellow. Can you tell us a bit about what you do, Sir Joe?
Well, what you described there is my full-time job. I could be retired. I've certainly reached the age that I could have retired a year or so ago, but I've chosen to continue working on for a while. So I'm what in posh terms you might call an ecumenist. I work in ecumenical affairs, which means that we work in between churches, encouraging them to work more closely together. In many different ways. So that's my main job. The primary agency for ecumenism in this country is Churches Together in England. Of course, there are other groups like Hope or the Evangelical Alliance, but Together in England brings churches together. And my full-time job there is supporting particularly the Pentecostal and charismatic churches.
Yes.
And those include, of course, a number of churches that people would recognize as black-led or black majority churches, be that the New Testament Church of God or Redeemed Church of God of Prophecy, my own denomination, and so on. So my full-time job is working in support of those churches as they embark on ecumenism together.
Yes, that's powerful. Well, the purpose we are talking about now is, as recently, and I just read a bit, as part of the ongoing efforts to right the wrongs experienced by the Windrush generations, Home Secretary Priti Patel has today, which is Monday the 22nd, Windrush Day, launched the Windrush Cross Government Working Group co-chaired by the Home Secretary and Bishop Derek Webley, brings together stakeholders and community leaders with senior representatives from a number of government departments to address the challenges faced by the Windrush generation and their descendants. Sergio, you have appointed as a member. Can you give us an idea what this commission is about and the rationale behind it? As I said earlier when I called you, a couple of persons were saying, "Is this a new commission?" So if you can explain, sir, for the benefit of all.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
Maybe the best thing for me to do is to give a bit of a context.
Yes,
Now,
sir.
of course, you have talked about the Windrush and where that originates. There are lots of people, by the way, who do not like this idea of being called by the name of a ship or the name of a river, which is where the name Windrush comes from. But be that as it may, the long distance description is going back to 1948. As we know, there were black people in the country before then. But 2 years ago, when some of us recognized that 22nd of June 2018 was going to be 70 years, some of us set about marking the day. The government joined in, the Queen even joined in, sent congratulations to us as we planned a major service in Westminster Abbey. A number of people, of course, were listening, may have been there. Now, we had that fantastic service, a state service really it was, and after that, the government indicated that they would, I call it give in to the campaign that had been launched several years before that for a Windrush Day. And so they announced that they would be pronouncing from there on end, the 22nd of June every year as Windrush Day. They put a £500,000 aside, which we complained was not enough. And it wasn't, but £500,000 aside to help mark Windrush Day. And for the 3 years since, it's just 2, but it's been 3, we've awarded 50 grants to people and groups wanting to mark Windrush Day. I was one of those people, along with others, people like Paulette from The Voice,
Paulette Simpson.
And several others, were on a group called the Windrush Day Advisory Group or Advisory Panel. We were there advising about how Windrush Day might go about being celebrated or commemorated and how the money is divided up. Now, cast yourself forward by 2 years and we come to this year. On a group called the government has now decided through the Home Secretary that they want to build the work that we were there advising about how now to make it so that they're creating, if you like, a super committee or working group to take charge in a way in terms of advising the government. Of course, we will never be the ones actually delivering it, but in terms of advising the government, scoping in the fantastic work which has been done by Wendy Williams in reviewing what was wrong with the Windrush scandal. She published a report several months ago, 30 recommendations, some of them very involved, and there's been an accusation of the government that they're not moving speedily enough to do that. But then you have other reports, like the David Lammy report that came out a couple of years back, and more recently we've had Professor Fenton's report into health. So what the government is now looking to do with this group is to ask us to help them deliver the Wendy Williams review report and its 30 recommendations. People would have heard the Home Secretary Monday that she has now embraced the full report and is committed to carrying out all of the report's recommendations.
Yes.
But to do that, they feel they need community support, and so they've got some of us as community stakeholders who are alongside that. That's one piece of work which we're tasked with. The second and third, quickly. The second is about how we help the government do right by the Windrush generation, all of us, as well as the wider BME constituency, who we know from all the indices live in this country, make a fantastic contribution both historically and now, and yet continue to live disproportionately at a disadvantage, whether that's health, whether that's education, whether that's employment, whether that's housing, any way you care to look. BAME community, it fares worse nearly in every instance than the white community. Sometimes it's a bit complex because some working class whites don't do so well either. So the second thing is to help the government see how to do right by BAME people, including African Caribbean people, who have committed ourselves to this country and have contributed, and yet find ourselves at the end of so many disadvantages. And the third thing is that the government is putting some money aside, and they want this working group to help them to apportion that money in the right way and to ensure that it is spent to the benefit of the community itself. So those are the three areas that we have been to work with them on.
If I can ask you this question, and as you mentioned, the Lamy report and various reports and various commissions, is that successive governments have been lacking in having all these commissions, these inquiries, but the implementation is falling short?
Of course, you can go back as far as you want to on that. Some of us remember Faith in the City. Way back in time, as maybe the first time that you saw a report where the government of the day looked like they were seriously interested in intervening in a way as to enhance the life of people who lived in inner cities that were being run down consistently. There's no question that if you're a poor white, or if you're a BAME from, who have your roots elsewhere, that you're not mainstream. Mainstream is sort of middle class and upwards. And they tend to cream off the best of the cake, and the rest, gets. So very often what governments do is that they launch commissions, they launch reviews, and they launch inquiries. But then when you look back as to how many of the recommendations made in those reviews, inquiries, commissions, you can count the number of things actually accomplished sometimes on one finger. Some people say to me, it's labor for the black people, and the conservatives are the ones against us. And I have to say that I have lived in this country for 50 years, just over. I've lived through Labour governments, conservative governments, and we had not so long ago a government of two parties coming together, coalition government. And I can say without equivocation that this is Britain, no matter which party is in power. This is the same Britain, SYLBOURNE, that led the way in stealing my forebears from Africa, packing us like ants on slave ships, taking us across the Atlantic. When we proved to be too heavy and the resources were running out, they threw us overboard on the high seas. Colston, whose statue was pulled down the other day, is reputed to have sent more than 20,000 Africans to their death on the high seas. And then when he got back to England, claimed insurance money for loss of property. This is the England that perpetrated that evil upon my ancestors. And then those who survived that hazardous capture and 3-week journey were then put to work in slave fields and cane fields and cotton fields across the Americas and across the Caribbean. And then when that lost steam put us years of colonialism, which was the purpose of which was not to build up the Caribbean or build up the Americas. It was to build up Britain. And then came the war, Second World War after the First, and we came here to try and to help, as well as help ourselves to get a better life. So when you ask me if looking after the interest of people that look like you and me has been a failure of government, successive government in this country, I'm saying that has a long tail that goes right back to slavery, when our interest was not necessarily their interest.
Yes.
And I'm
Yes.
not sure why we would think that, having gone through all that I've just described in summary over the last 500 to 600 years, I'm not sure why we would think that we'd live in Britain today and it might be a bed of roses. There's nothing
Yes.
in our history to suggest that. And there's nothing in our history either to suggest that the Labour Party is better for us than the Conservative Party, or some other party is better for us, or a Liberal Party better for us. No, in every situation, Britain, all of Britain, all of its party, all of its institutions, including the church, have
Yes.
swam in that sea of racism and have never had our best interest at heart. The sooner we get that through our skulls, the
Yes.
better we will be in setting ourselves about how, as the Rastas say, how you're going to live in a Babylon.
Now, it's interesting that you flag up that point there, and I'm going to come on to a bit more what it is. I did put something up when I did your write up, and what I did on the write up, and I'll see if I can find it here. The write up said, let me see, where is it? Yes, here it is. This is what it said: racism in the UK, how can it be tackled? Or can it be? Hold a point there. I'm going to come back onto that later. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for coming on. I'm joined by Bishop Dr. Joe Aldred, who is part of the new working commission to see how the implementation of the recent inquiry or commission by Wendy Williams, which is a part of the committee. We're going to touch on racism a bit later, but I want to delve a bit more into the, what should I say? How do you, do you have much confidence that this Windrush, the compensation and the righting of the wrongs will be achieved? Because I believe that there is, of the thousands or so, it's a minimum amount of persons who have somewhat been compensated, and the level of compensation, I understand, is not enough.
Well, that's a big question. Do I have any confidence, you say?
Yes.
I do not go into these things. As I explained before, I've been on the other Windrush Day advisory panel for 2 years. I do not go into these things with any sense of confidence or
Yes, sir.
expectation that all is going to be well. No, that's not my approach at all.
Yes.
My approach is that we, you and me, and others like us, must be the drivers, the designers and drivers of our own destiny.
Yes.
Right. So I'm not piling on top of this new group or the plans the government has the solution to all of my troubles, or yours, or the community.
Yes.
What this is about is a recognition that as a people in this country, we have suffered from the racism which is endemic in Western mindsets and Western cultures. If people are following what I'm saying, they will hear me to say it is not unexpected. Some people say, well, Britain invited us and we came, as if we expected them to be waving flags of welcome at
Yes.
Tilbury on the 22nd of June 1948. Nothing in the history that we had with Britain should have indicated that that was going to be the case. Nothing, right? We should have known we're going to make some money over there, but boy, it's going to be tough. Street not paved with no gold. Nobody not going to welcome us. And what do we know? We know that the Labour Party that was in power at the time, the 22nd of June 1948, the ship actually docked on the 21st, right? The day before the 22nd, which is the date that we have. And
Yes.
what was happening in Parliament, in Whitehall? They were having emergency meetings about whether or not they should turn the ship back because it had too many black people in it. And they were going to disrupt the flow of British life. That was under a Labour government. right? So Labour or Conservative make no difference to me, and I want to suggest to us it makes no difference to us, no substantive difference to us either. So I don't go into this thing thinking, I have confidence that this government is going to deliver this. What I go into it with is, as I said, that background that we are in a particular place in our relationship, historic and contemporary, with this country, but we have been dealt some avoidable blows,
Yes.
even if you take into account the racism that is ever present. We have been dealt some avoidable blows. So, for example, when it comes to Windrush, people don't like some of what I have to say about Windrush, but I say to folks, A, 99%, and that's an estimate, but it's my estimate. 99% of people that we might call Windrush generation have absolutely no problem with the hostile environment in terms of being caught up in it. You ask most people as you go around the country, do you know anybody personally who has been caught up in this? And most people will tell you no, because most of us, I've never met anybody who, but what we do know is that it may be 1% of the 1 million of us in the country. And we get a sense of it, by the way, because 12,000 people up to now, in the 2 years, 12,000 people have been issued with documents, right? Passports or other indefinite stay to remain. 12,000 out of a million.
Yes.
60 people, 60 have been given money from the scheme, from the compensation scheme. And the number of people that the Prime Minister actually apologized to the other day just about got into double figures. So what we're dealing with is, and the first thing I think we need to not the first, one of the things we must reconcile ourselves with is that we must stop acting as though the entire 1 million of us in this country are affected by this Windrush fiasco. Because 99% of us did due diligence, sorted out our passports, and are safe in that regard. Okay, that's the first thing I want to say. So the numbers are low, Silver. The numbers
Yes.
are low because the amount of people actually caught up in this is quite small, relatively small. Now that doesn't make their plight easy, but
Yes.
unless we get that into the narrative, that the majority of us, who should be congratulated, by the way, for having ensured that we sorted out our papers. And I say to Jamaicans living anywhere in the world,
Yeah.
Anywhere in the world, China, Russia, wherever you are, make sure that your residency papers are secure, right? So the majority of us secured that, and a minority have got caught. Now, what we also know, Sylvan, is that the government, inside of government, did a risk assessment before Theresa May's government brought in this, what they call the compliant environment, which means that they were after people who were here illegally. And if you were here illegally, they're after you. We're going to capture you and we're sending you home, right? And if you can't prove that you have a right to be here, then we're going to send you home. Now, when they did the risk assessment on moving to that policy, they were told by their own Whitehall mandarins that if they did that, there was going to be a small proportion of people in this country who could not prove that they had a right to be here, even though they had a right to be here. But they didn't have the paperwork to prove it. The majority will be fine, but there'll be some. They went ahead and they applied this environment anyway. We call it the hostile because it is hostile. So it
Yes.
meant that if you were here and for any reason you hadn't secured your status here. Before that, nobody was asking you. If you went to rent a room, nobody was asking you for your passport, right? If you went to sign in a GP, probably asked you for a gas bill or something,
Yeah.
not your passport. But this compliant environment meant that you had to now prove it. Now, if you're a landlord and the government says to you, if you rent your room to somebody who shouldn't be in this country, we're going to penalize you with a hefty fine. What would you
Yes.
do? You begin to quiz anybody who look like they could be not from here, which
Yes.
means black people, brown people, right? So it had an element of racism threaded through it, in that the people who are going to come under scrutiny isn't your average white person. It is nearly always going to be somebody dark to black, okay? And so
Yeah.
these things have been brought in and have injured the people that we've seen on our TV screens, injured the few people, admittedly, who have been deported, as a Windrush person, and those people, absolutely, we may argue that, well, they should have sorted out their papers, as we Jamaicans say, but there'll be lots of reasons why people haven't done that. Okay, so let's give them the benefit of the doubt. What should not have happened to them is that government bring in some legislation late in the day, in the evening, when everybody gone to sleep, and say, no, from now on, you have to show your passport. And therefore, if you don't have a passport, even though you have a right to one, but you don't have one, you are going to be regarded as a criminal who have overstayed your welcome. Those wrongs need to be right.
I need to ask this question, because listening to you now and what you said about that 90%, I believe you went further and said 99% of persons from Windrush generation are okay in the sense that they did what they should have done.
They have their papers.
They have their papers.
They're documented.
So therefore, how do you feel then? You're a person who is from the Windrush era, your parents, am I correct?
Well, right. Both. I came here in 1968 as a boy.
Right. When you hear Windrush, there's a positive side of it, in the sense that these persons came to build, but there's also this other scandalous aspect, as if to say everybody is somewhat being tarnished or deemed as Windrush. How does that make you feel, or the conversation you've had with others who have sorted out themselves?
Well, on a personal note, I strongly object to this projection in the country that we as a people are some kind of a vulnerable group.
Yeah.
I'm a proud black man. I'm a proud Garveyite who believe in self-determination. I'm a proud Christian who believe that God has made me in God's own image and likeness. Listen, I don't bow to nobody, right?
Yes.
To nobody at all, right? So when I know that, as I said, 99% of the people around me that I know personally don't come near to falling foul of this hideous law that has been brought in, right, to catch those who don't have documents. So why do we want to project this poor me, pity me idea about Windrush people? Look what has been done to the Windrush generation. No. I personally object to that narrative. I think we need to disaggregate the issue, and we need to recognize that the overwhelming majority, and I'm putting my figure on it as 99% of us, the overwhelming majority of us have our documents to prove our legitimacy to be here long time. That must be credited. You mustn't then lump us all together and say all of us, the whole Windrush generation, are being lined up to be put on planes and ships to send back home, because it is not true, and it doesn't support my understanding of who we are as a proud, diligent people who sort out our business and recognize that there will always be reasons why some may fall through the cracks. And when they fall through the cracks because of what the government has done in bringing these terrible laws that require people now to prove your right to be here, never was the case before. Britain was never a compliant society like that until Mrs. May brought in those laws. And by the way, on this group, this commission that I'm on, this committee, one of my requests is that those laws need to be rescinded. If you really are sorry about the pain you've caused to, albeit not that great a number of people, but that pain is severe for every individual, if you really are sorry, then remove those laws from the statute books. Remove them. So Wendy Williams is also called in her report, by the way, which we are tasked to help to deliver. In one of her recommendations is for the government to review those legislations. And I have to tell her, I've never met her, but I can tell her that I am absolutely full square behind her in that regard, because that law, those laws are racist in their nature, because they lead people to pursue people who look like you and me for when we go to rent somewhere. But you asked me a second part about what am I hearing? That's my own feelings, right? That I am saying I object to being lumped together as, everybody never sort out their papers, right?
It's interesting to use the word. I'm going to come back. You keep that point. It's interesting to mention lumping together, because we're seeing the same debate about BAME, the lumping together of persons as well. Even with COVID, the lumping together of the BME who are more prone to be sick, and the pity me thing. But I want to go back to finish what you're saying. And
I'm saying some of what some other people have said to me.
Other people, yes.
Is that, well, since the people who didn't sort out their documents are now getting their passports for free, and we know 12,000 people have been given their stuff, then are they going to give me my money back? Right?
Yes.
Some people have asked me that question, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm not one of those people asking for that, right? I think that those of us, which I say the overwhelming majority of us, who sorted out our papers, did what we should do. Some people have reasons why that did not happen. And there are many reasons, by the way. I can tell you of a black lady in Birmingham who used to, back in the 70s, 80s, used to work in the community. And she told me, as we were talking about this 2 years ago, when this was really blowing up, she said that at the time, like me, I did this in the church, she, in community, would see people and ask them, we got a 5-year window, because under Maggie Thatcher, we had that 5-year window. When if you applied for it, you get it. After that, it would be discretionary. So we were keen to encourage people to take advantage of applying for your citizenship, because it's yours. All right. Nobody can turn you down for it if you had come here before a certain time. And she said most people went along and, yes, let me help you. Please help me to fill out my forms. But she said she's never forgotten the one person, if it was only one, who look her straight in her, what did Jamaica say, in her morning, and say to her, "Me nah fill out no form."
They're British. Now, some people said they're British. They're not.
Indeed, I mean, a lot of people had that view, but some people, genuinely had come up with on their parents' passport, and they have never travelled for whatever reason, and so they have had no reason to even get there. So there are myriad of reasons why people have been left without their documentation. So, but I'm saying it's a small amount of people, relatively speaking, a small number of people, and what we must do is stop pretending it's all of us, so that we can focus on that minority of people who have been sorely disadvantaged, and who therefore needs not just our compassion, but our support in getting, especially now that we know, as I've told you, that the government knew, they were told from risk assessment, that if they brought in this compliant environment, or what we call the hostile environment, by requiring doctors, landlords, etc., future employers. I mean, I've had loads of jobs over the years, right? Nobody's ever asked me for my passport, because that's only come up in the last few years since that law was brought in, right? So what I'm saying is I'm laying that blame squarely at the government's door for bringing in something which has made the life of a few people that did not have their documentation in order a misery. And I can only, we've seen the documentaries, I can only imagine what happened to somebody's life.
Yes.
You've lived here. You came up here with your mother or your father, right? You were 5, you were 3, you were 1. You've never traveled, therefore you never thought about your passport. People say, well, you should have done. But I just haven't, right? And now, having been here for all these years, you're in your 50s or 60s, settled down, married, have grandchildren, somebody knock on your door and say you are an illegal immigrant and we're taking you away to a detention center. I mean, that must be an earth-shattering blow, all because of the way in which this government has gone about changing the laws around that.
Right. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next point now. So, ladies and gentlemen, Joe Aldred is part of the the group, which is co-chaired by the Home Secretary and Bishop Derek Webley, to right the wrongs of the Windrush, and a part of this Windrush Cross Government Working Group. The purpose of the group is to provide strategic input into the Home Office response to Wendy Williams' lessons learn review, support the design and delivery of practical solutions to address the wider challenges that disproportionately affect people from Black and wider BME background, advise on the design and delivery of the Windrush, and also some of the members of the group is Paulette Simpson, from The Voice, Blundell Clough, Chief Executive of West India Committee, Kunle Olode, Director of Voice Change, and I believe Dwayne Brooks as well, isn't it? So Uncle Joe, listen, I want to wish you well on that project, and I know you'll be very strategic in this whole thing. And sometimes I say to when I listen to you, sometimes I think you remind me of my older self, which I have not reached yet. Somebody said, but
well, listen, we've got you. You'll get there, man. Don't worry.
But I want to just tag into this thing about racism in the UK. Just I have you, and I've been trying to have you for a long time.
I know. I'm glad I've been able to make it.
Yeah. So even though I've got a little time scale, I just want to go with it. And listen, I've got a lot of questions here.
I know. I'm seeing some of them come up on the screen.
Yeah, and I have to actually even just put a couple to you because
I'm happy to field some of those questions too.
Yeah, because they're part of my hosting. How has the Pentecostal church been affected by COVID, and how do you see things going forward in regards to church services in recent government advice regarding the size of congregation? I believe Dr. David Burton has brought it up because you can go to the pubs and have fun and everything, but church.
Well, I mean, I don't know whether you want to mix it up or whether you want to stick with the questions about Windrush, because I can see one question up from, is it Kamina or Kima?
Yes.
Don't think we need these laws for security reasons, she's asking. And yes. I presume that you're asking that. I presume it's a she, right?
It's a she.
I'm taking it that you're asking that with regard to those laws that we're talking about that make up for this compliant environment.
Yes.
And I'm saying, I would only say to you, I mean, I'm not a lawmaker, but I would say to you that, and to anyone who else asked that underground security, that up until the time when Mrs. May her government brought in, we had lived without them. We had lived without them. And the government already has enough immigration laws and laws generally to catch people who are here illegally. They did not need those laws. And when you think of the pain those laws have caused, and sometimes some of us think that this only applied to us, West Indians, Caribbean, Jamaicans. Windrush now in the government parlance means the world. And some of those figures, when I say 12,000 people have been issued with papers, we instinctively think that means Caribbean people. No.
Yes.
No. Yeah. Those are 12,000 people from around the world who were also stung by the same bad laws that were brought in. They were not needed for security reasons. And I said, we live without them for as long as Britain has been here, up until about 4-6 years ago when they were brought in. And all they've done is to make the life of a few people already disadvantaged even worse. I'm happy to answer the question, if you like, about the church opening.
Yeah, I just want to, just because David has asked one, just touch that one and then we move on. Yeah.
Well, David, listen, this, lots of us are asking. We see the briefing which stopped today. I didn't know what to do with myself at 5 o'clock. No briefing on TV. We've seen those briefings, and we've seen the Prime Minister and other ministers making announcements about different aspects of life opening up and so on. And for a long time, it's as though there was no mention of churches, right? And what's happening to us. Now, some people think that means that nothing is happening. But I can tell you, as one of the people who work within the churches at the national level, that that's never been quiet. Okay, so there are lots happening behind the scene. The press tend to report on what they tend to report on. And for a long time, actually, faith was not seemingly part of the vocabulary of those who are making these announcements in government. So the government set up a task force, a faith task force, an interface task force, whose job it has been to advise the government about reopening of faith spaces. And that's across faiths, temples, gurdwaras, churches. Now, where we are right now is that as of about 2 weeks ago, the government announced that they were taking on the first phase of the reopening of churches. And there was an image of the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Cardinal Bishop for the Catholics, Vincent Nichol, going into each other's basilicas, or to pray in each other's spaces, right? So the government had allowed the opening up of churches for the purpose of what some call private prayers. Okay, that has been the case now for the last 3 weeks or so. Now, they have heard from people like me directly, because we have meetings with ministers about these things and with their advisors, civil servants, and so on. And they've heard very clearly from the likes of me that when you say you can open up your church for private prayers, you're not talking to Pentecostals. You're just not talking to Pentecostals and a number of other such churches. The idea that one person going for private prayer might suit some traditions. So they've heard that loud and clear. We've had Zoom with some of the most powerful Black church leaders in the country talking directly to ministers about this. And that doesn't mean we're all happy, but it means that we've been engaged in the conversation. And listen, the government have a tough thing on its hand. It's fighting a pandemic in the country that, if it goes more wrong than it is, could kill a lot more people. So we've got to understand that theirs is the responsibility of keeping us all safe, right? So however well or badly they do that job, that is still their responsibility. So we've got to understand that they've got a tough hand to play, right? So when they're saying, for example, to churches, we can't let 500 of you go back into a church hall, talking on each other and spreading the virus.
Yes.
And sadly, your viewers may know this, but let me just say, there have been examples around the world, in America, in Korea, where groups of Christians have decided that coronavirus can't get them, right? And they've in one church the other day, apparently 130 odd people contracted the virus because they were just laissez-faire with it. So we can't afford that. So we've all signed. I know there's some people who see this as conspiracy theory and it's the government's plan to shut it down, and this is the 666 and all that stuff. I have to tell people I don't buy into any of those things. There have been many pandemics in history. This is another one of them. In fact, the 1980 Spanish flu is reputed to have killed some 60 to 100 million people.
Wow.
Right? This one hasn't even reached 1 million yet. So, there have been worse pandemics. And that happened, by the way, during a world war. So if we think we're having it rough now and the Lord must be coming back on the back of this, well, he didn't come for that in 1919 and in 1719 when, 100 times more people died. So I don't see why you think he's going to leave his throne in heaven to come down for this, right? So we can come off of that high horse and just recognize that safety is what we're all about here. And so when we get back into churches, we have to go back in such a way as is the safest we can manage, right? So where we are now, to come straight up to the question that your viewer asked, is that on the 4th of July, when everything else pretty much is being opened, churches will be open too. Okay, that is where we are. The only question that remains is what will be the restrictions. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, for example, will they allow? I am certainly arguing, and a number of people are arguing. I have put this directly to ministers, to their advisors, and to their civil servants, that the ideal place to get to on the 5th, Sunday, the 5th of July, is that churches are simply told they can go back to church provided you obey safe distancing and everybody, as far as possible, wear a face mask, and that you have a good cleaning regime in place. You have dispensers with hand cleaners, and then when people have gone out of the place, you give it a good deep clean for the next time when they come. Our argument, and mine personally, is that the government should trust the leaders of churches who have been running their churches for years, who have the safety of their members at heart, that they will recognize the need to keep safe distance, to make sure people don't spread the germs all over each other by any means. Face covering is reckoned to be good if you are in a confined space, and that within that space you stay from, and they're talking about singing as well, about whether singing, and again, they make a very valid point that if you sing or if you blow a trumpet, right, the invisible particles from your body that goes out of you can travel.
And the various mics that people use as well.
Indeed, the more force you speak with, the further the invisible and visible particles will go. So that's where we are. We're waiting for the guidelines to come out. But we know that, like everybody else, churches will be, at least that's a plan at the moment of government, will be opening or can open from the 4th and the 5th of July.
Well, thank you for that. In the last few minutes that we have or so, I wanted to wrap up with the key factor or the key conversation which is happening in the UK now about racism. We know racism has been around, but its head has been blown up very high. And the question that I put is, racism in the UK, how can it be tackled, or can it really be tackled?
Well, it can be tackled. The question is how successfully or not.
Yes.
In a sense, Black people have been fighting racism from we encountered white people in Africa, 600 years ago. It's been racism, and in Western cultures has developed this idea of the dehumanizing of the African, and that's been done through pseudoscience. It's been done through people misusing the Bible. It's been done through scaremongering, about Black people and who we are and what we are, all in an effort to justify why we could be enslaved and bought and sold. So we are now living in a new phase of that relationship between Black people, Africans, and Europeans, if you like. And when we are in England, I'm saying to us, don't think that this is the first time that you and I and our people are tackling racism. Toussaint Louverture tackled it in Haiti way back, fighting off the French, beating them, sending them scampering back to France. And then France imposed upon them sanctions that they paid for over 100 years and have never been able to survive. On the plantation fields in the Caribbean, some of the best churchmen in Jamaica, for example, led rebellions that many of them were then hung on gallows. One of them famously said, I would rather be hung on yonder gallows than live as a slave. Right? And so this is not a new fight that we're in, fighting against racism. So I say to folks in this country that we must have a sense of history. Some of the greatest fighters against racism understood that they can't necessarily stop racism from happening, right? Because you have to get into the man and woman's heart to change their heart. You can't do that, right? And which is why my encouragement to my people that look like me is to say, do not hang your future on the end of racism. And the reason I say that is because you don't control that. You must only hang your future on what you can control, not on what somebody else is controlling.
Yeah.
So my worry about the Black Lives Matter movement at the moment is that if people don't have a sense of history, if people don't have a sense of how ingrained racism is in Western society, they might be fooled into thinking that when this has all died down, the world will be free from racism. I say, think again. Think again. What I think is necessary to live in a place where racism exists are two or three things. One, good, strong, and effective anti-racism laws. That's one thing. And for that to work well, we need to get involved in the legal process. More of us need to, like you, study law, practice law, become a judge, get into the legal system, become a JP. More of us need to get involved, join the police force, right? So for the law to work well, we need to be involved in it. We can't just be the done to. We must be part of the mechanics of it all. So that's the first thing, good, strong laws. And I would say, by and large in this country, we have pretty much good, strong laws. You can always improve them. But I think Britain is probably, in Europe, is probably the best country when it comes to its anti-racism laws.
Yes.
Right? Other countries in Europe are much worse. But that is not to say Britain is perfect, but it is not bad at that. The second thing, though, that I think we need to fight racism is Black people's own state of mental health, right? How we think.
Yes.
And sadly, I have to say, having lived the life here in England for these many years, too many of us seem to have bought into white perspectives of Black. Too many of us have bought into that. And so what it seems we are chasing most of all is white acceptance. Something, again, that you can never, ever be in control of.
Yes.
Because you can't make the other person like you or love you. You can't. So what you have to then do is stop chasing white acceptance and chase instead Black acceptance. You accept yourself as somebody made in the image of God who needs nobody's validation.
Yes.
Nobody. I don't care how chalk white they are. You don't need their validation as a human being. You are a human being in your own right because God made you that way. And until we get there, until we see ourselves not needing the validation of another human being in a system that seems like that's what you must do. Some people bleach their skin so they can look lighter. They straighten their hair, they wear wig till the cows come home, trying to look European. I understand some of that. But what I am saying is, my friends listening and watching this tonight, I'm saying the validation you need is your own. And we validate each other. So we need to support each other better. There are things which we have done in this country. The Pentecostal Credit Union, for example, set up by a Black Pentecostal minister, runs into millions of pounds in terms of how much money it has in the bank. More of us need to recognize that it is there. Jamaica National, the other companies that come out of Jamaica and from the Caribbean. We must validate ourselves. And what we try to do when we do that, with good laws, self-validation, you find a way to psychologically transcend racism.
So what you're actually saying right there now is, with the whole demonstration and the whole seeking affirmation, seeking reparation, seeking all these things, while it is good, at the same time, one should be in a position that if it doesn't come, you should be able to stand by your...
I'm saying more than that. I'm saying do not pin your hope on it.
Don't pin your hopes on it.
That's a pipe dream. It hasn't come in the last 600 years.
Yes.
What makes you think it's going to come in the next 6 days? Yes. Don't pin your hope on it. Listen, I haven't said this. Let me say this clearly. I talk about transcending racism. You can't get rid of it. It's embedded in the structures of the West.
Stop right there. I've said it sometime to people before, and I said, accept this. I said it at a meeting once, and I was almost booed. I said, listen, accept the fact you'll never get rid of racism.
No, 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 no.
And people were saying, oh, you know, please go ahead. Yes,
we have learned to live in a world as we have done, and I've been talking about to Saint Overture, turn of the 19th century, wherever, 20th century, and I'm saying we have had to live with this in the world. What make you think racism runs through the country like a Blackpool rock, right? You'd have to destroy the entire rock to get rid of racism. So don't let nobody fool you. All these, listen, there are too many middle-class, comfortable black people.
Oh, my days.
In this country. Let me just go there for a minute.
Yes,
too many middle-class, comfortable black people who make a living out of
a lucrative lifestyle, I must say.
A lucrative lifestyle, so supposedly defending black people, when really all they're doing is selling us on this pipe dream that on our behalf, they are going to get rid of racism for us. And they're not going to stop fighting until they get rid of racism, gonna leave the country. You know who profits? Them. They profit. They get big bungs for selling their newspaper articles. They get titles from the government and the Queen. And the life of the average black person off the street still is lived under racism. I'm just saying to us, wise up. Don't be used or abused by black nor white. And don't believe all these people making a lot of noise because they have the mic. Don't believe them. That they are doing what is in your best interest. Look at the titles. I've got 2 big titles, bishop and doctor. But the doctor I work hard for at university, staying up late at night, studying through the night to get it. Right? The bishop the church conveyed put up upon me. But a lot of people with titles and with places around microphones, right, arguing as if they have the key to open the door and end racism. I am telling you, it's a lie. Do not believe it. I was going on to say there are 3 things that we need: social, economic, and political power.
Yes.
Those are the things that we need to gradually get in this country if we really are going to counter the ever-present racism. Become powerful in your culture, your social domain, economics. Too many of us are poor and live in poverty. More of us need to become entrepreneurs. We need to make sure our children get the education they need. If the school don't provide it for you, get them extra help to make sure they get the education. Point them in directions above where the teachers would locate them. Right? Tell them to ascend to the stars so they get a good education. We need to become powerful in our employment so we can become economically powerful. We need to buy things like life insurance. So when you die, your people who leave behind have money to not only bury you, but can actually get a new start in life. So we need social, economic, and political strength in this country. More of us need to vote. More of us need to join political parties. More of us need to run for parliament, run for local council, and we need to get involved, become strong. That's the only way we are going to fight racism, not by believing those people who are telling us that just trust me, I'm going to get rid of it for you.
That's very interesting, Uncle Joe. And so what you're actually saying now, it is how you navigate yourself through where you are, because many people sometimes say to me, you need to come back home and you need to go back to Jamaica, for Jamaica, not there, England. And I always try to say, well, Joe, when I look around me in the UK, I see, well, now my children, my son is now 13, my daughter is here. I'm seeing lots of black children. I got a couple of young men that I mentor, and I say, hang on a second, we can't leave. At the same time, when actually there's work that needs to be done. I think someone said to me, and I believe it was you, that said, if you go into the water, don't be surprised if you
get wet.
Or get bitten by a jellyfish.
Or get jelly. Indeed. And that's where, but listen, some people are living in fool's paradise, because they behave as though Britain is the only place with challenges. So, the big thing here is racism. But if you're in Jamaica, you'd have other challenges. If you're in America, you have Donald Trump, right? Wherever you are, you will be challenged. So I say to folks, people say, well, you shouldn't accept that there's racism. Well, I tell you what, you better just accept that it exists, because it really does, right? And there's no sign of it going anywhere. You have to become bigger than it in your mind and bigger than it in your life. And you can't just trust, as I said, people who say they're going to get rid of it for you, right? Because whilst they're busy trying to get rid of it for you, they're just getting richer and richer and richer, and you're not moving, right? But if you can find a way, build up some streams of income, become entrepreneurial in this place, because, you know, there are, and by the way, can I just say, not every, even though the system and the West is racist to the core, not every white person is indisposed to you, right? What you'll find is that if you become socially strong, politically strong, economically strong, you would be amazed at the number of white allies that you will find. You really will. I've said to folks, in my life in England, at almost every crucial turn, there has been a white person there in support of me. You know, I got into broadcasting because a white woman heard me in a meeting, called me out afterwards and said, "You've got a lovely voice for radio. Do you mind if I pass your name on to my friends in the BBC?" That's how I got into broadcasting. It was a white woman who didn't owe me nothing, who did that for me. I finished up getting, you know, my master's degree and my PhD because a white man said to me, "Joe, I heard that you are in Sheffield. Why don't you come over to the Centre for Urban Studies and let's talk?" And that guy, a white guy, still alive today, traveled with me for over 10 years as I did my master's and my PhD as my supervisor and my confidant during that time. So even though you live in a racist Britain, once you are clear about the direction of your life, once you accept that you live in this water where there are jellyfish and stop pretending that somehow you can change it, right? What you need to do is to become bigger than it. And I'm a preacher, so can I end with one word of scripture?
People are saying 3 months of sermon in one evening.
So here it goes. So here is one. Here is one sermon. Here's one text of the 3 sermons.
Yes.
Right? David says in the Psalm, not all the Psalms are by David, I know.
Yes.
But David said in the Psalms, let's say it's David.
Yes.
In the 23rd Psalm, "Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies." Right? I don't know when that psalm was written, but more than 2,000 years ago, right? More like 3. "You, God, prepare a table before me in the presence of mine enemies." Those people who are telling you that your enemies have to disappear before you can eat are selling you on a lie. The God who we have come to understand is capable of making you big and powerful enough that even though your enemies are still there, you can set your table, eat a 3-course meal, and belch.
And the scripture that come to me also is an effective door has been opened, and there are many opposed. But the key thing is that the door is open.
Doors are open. Keep your eyes on the doors.
Yes.
Not just on the opposition.
Because
there's no door that opens and there isn't a wind trying to blow it back in your face. No door. So we live in this place and there are oppositions. Racism is real, but so too is God, and so too is the strength of our character that has seen our ancestors journey through the last 600 years, that you and I, SYLBOURNE, can be here tonight to tell the tale.
Fantastic. Well, ladies and gentlemen, on that note, we're talking about part 1 because we'll have to bring back Uncle Joe again. But before you go, I just want to just read a few of the last comments that came on here. We've got David Burton, who actually who's the one that was making some of those comments. Let
like me 3 months of sermons in one
3
year.
months of sermon in 1 year, yes. And there's Keisha Allen, which is saying these parties are institutional racist. Actually, I think I was saying to you today, I believe the whole world is institutional racist.
well, for anybody to believe that any political party in Britain or any British church is not institutionally racist. They've not
Yes.
been paying attention.
Yes. And there is Bishop Mark Nicholson saying, "Good evening, gentlemen." I've got Yasmin.
Well, let me just say hi to Mark, of course. And Yasmin, say, I know both of those.
Yeah, great talk, Joe. There's a racist born every minute. We'll never get rid of it. And David again said, "Emancipate yourself from mental slavery." Carla Campbell Burton. This is
David,
interesting.
sound like you want to take over my job as a preacher.
Yeah, he said, "Haven't logged on to Facebook in months, but Dr. Joe Aldred, you're speaking the truth. Absolute breath of fresh air." Well, I hope she will keep tuning into my show. And of course, that's Dr. Burton's wife. And Bishop, your teaching is really good. That's from Keisha Allen. She and Kama are twins. And Keisha actually came back saying amen. And Yasmin actually say, "Bring Joe back soon." Okay, so we got that covered. Well, listen, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for a Nubian E's excellent show. I want to thank you so much for coming on. And this is the start of something I might have to make. David is actually my resident doctor that comes on and keep updates on COVID. He's coming back tomorrow night. We've been doing this since COVID. So Uncle Joe, I believe that the whole racist issue is something which is profound and it is key. We've got lots of young people growing up in this country. They're hearing, I believe, wrong messages. And I believe we need to also let them hear the other message as well.
Absolutely.
And that is something which, and that's why I use this platform as much as possible. Uncle Joe has sort of gave us an idea about the whole new commission, which is set up by the Home Office, chaired by Dr. Webley, which is a part of, to see the right of the wrongs for the Windrush persons who have been wronged by the Windrush.
That's what they say they want to do, and we're going to try and help them.
That's what they say they want to do. Let's qualify that. And at the same time, he did say that while we have the Windrush issue, never forget that 99% of those who came on the Windrush are not affected in that way. So we need to strike a balance because they tend to be this lumping, just like we have been hearing BME, ethnic, COVID. We got to touch on that one another time about the level of why they're talking about Black and minority ethnic need to be more get the vaccine first because of certain things, but we touched it another time.
That's another scare story. There ain't even any vaccine.
Yes. And then we finished off talking about racism in this country and talking about how we can go through it. I think we've drawn the conclusion to a certain extent that you'll never get rid of racism, but what you can do is strengthen yourself as an individual, know who you are, and as a man of faith, just like Uncle Joe, we will can't speak of anybody else, but we can say, have your sense of faith in God. Many people have this perception that there's a white Jesus, a black Jesus, or whatever Jesus, but that's another thing there. So the key thing is know who you are, get yourself educated, socially, let's get ourselves in the different structures of politics, law, and good governance in this country, and to be on the different areas that will create change, to be the change and to make the change that you want to see. And don't wait on somebody to validate you. Validate yourself, validate your community, and validate each other. And as Uncle Joe came today, he came and he validated us. And we're very grateful for you, Sir Joe. Okay?
My great pleasure. Lovely to be with you.
Thank you, sir.
Forward to joining you again another time.
Fantastic. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for the good night. I'll sign off now. And, you can watch it on replay. And please share it. It's on YouTube as well. And tomorrow night, I'll have Dr. David Burton, where we'll be talking about COVID-19, as to the updates, as to the different new rules and new guidance which have been set up. And on Friday, of course, my youth night, which I'll have another 2 teenagers, I think 15 and 16, hearing their views about what it is like growing up in the UK. So thank you very much. Have a good night and all the best.